If you've been gardening for a while, you've probably heard the rule repeated like gospel: compost needs oxygen, turn the pile, fluff it up, don't let it go anaerobic, oxygen equals life, right? Well, yes, but also not the full story. Today at Rootshaven Grounds, we're digging into a side of composting most gardening guides barely whisper about. The fact that some composting methods don't just use oxygen, they absolutely devour it. And if you don't understand what's happening, you might think your pile has gone wrong when it's actually doing something incredibly powerful. Let's break down what's really going on inside that heap, and how you can use this knowledge to build richer soil faster. Traditional composting advice focuses on aerobic decomposition. That means microbes that thrive in the presence of oxygen break down organic matter into stable, earthy compost. These microbes work efficiently, produce heat, and usually don't create foul smells. So far, so good. But here's the part most people don't explain. During active composting, especially in hot piles, the microorganisms can consume oxygen so rapidly that the center of the pile temporarily becomes oxygen depleted. In other words, the compost process itself can burn through available oxygen faster than it can naturally flow back in. This doesn't mean your compost is failing. It means it's alive and working intensely. The problem only comes when we don't manage airflow to match that biological demand. When a compost pile heats up, it's not the sun doing the work, it's microbial respiration. Billions of bacteria and fungi are feasting on carbon-rich materials and using nitrogen to build proteins, just like living organisms everywhere. In the process, they consume oxygen, release carbon dioxide, and generate heat. In a well-built hot compost pile, oxygen levels in the core can drop very quickly. If the structure of the pile is too dense, too many wet greens, too little airflow, oxygen can't move back in fast enough. That's when aerobic microbes slow down and anaerobic organisms take over, and that's the moment most gardeners panic. Let's clear up a big misconception. Anaerobic conditions aren't automatically terrible. They're just different, and whether they help or hurt depends on your goal. In classic backyard composting, prolonged anaerobic conditions can lead to, well, rotten smells, a slimy texture, slower breakdown, and even nutrient loss through unwanted gases. But, controlled oxygen depletion is actually part of several powerful composting approaches, including things like trench composting, bokashi fermentation, and even deep static piles. In these systems, low oxygen environments drive different biological processes that can still produce some pretty amazing soil amendments. So, honestly, the real issue isn't oxygen versus no oxygen. It's really about control versus neglect. Many beginner guides teach composting like a light switch. Oxygen equals good, no oxygen equals bad. That's easy to remember, sure, but nature isn't that simple. Healthy soils themselves contain both aerobic and anaerobic zones. Tiny pockets inside soil aggregates often lack oxygen, yet they play a crucial role in nutrient cycling. Compost is similar. Microenvironments form all the time inside a pile. The key is balance. Short periods of low oxygen inside a hot pile can actually help break down tough materials. But if the whole system collapses into an airless mass, decomposition shifts in an unhelpful direction. So instead of fearing oxygen loss, we learn to manage structure, moisture, and airflow. A bad-smelling compost pile is often blamed on not enough air, and while that's partly true, the deeper issue is excess nitrogen and compaction. When you overload a pile with kitchen scraps, fresh grass clippings, or manure without enough dry carbon materials, microbes multiply rapidly and burn through oxygen at high speed. The pile collapses into a wet, dense mass where air simply can't move. That's when you get the infamous rotten egg or sour smell. It's not that compost suddenly hates oxygen, it's that microbial demand exceeded your pile's ability to supply it. So if you're aiming for a fast, hot compost pile that doesn't turn into a smelly swamp, structure is everything, folks. You want to start with coarse, bulky browns at the base. Think small sticks, shredded cardboard, dry stems. These will create air channels from the ground up, you see. Then, you want to layer greens and browns in a balanced way, aiming for that damp sponge feel rather than dripping wetness. Chop your materials smaller, but hey, don't turn them into mush. Fine particles do break down faster, but they can also pack tightly, restricting airflow. A mix of textures, well, that creates natural air pockets. As the pile heats, those microbes will burn oxygen quite aggressively. Turning the pile every week or two isn't just tradition. It's how you recharge those oxygen levels and redistribute materials so everything composts evenly. Now, here's something fascinating. Some gardeners are experimenting with composting methods that limit turning and allow sections of the pile to go low oxygen on purpose. These static pile approaches rely on careful material balance and passive airflow rather than frequent disturbance. The idea really is to build fungal-dominant compost and preserve more carbon structure rather than rapidly oxidizing everything through constant turning. When done right, these piles don't rot. They slowly transform into rich, dark compost with excellent soil-building properties. The trick is that airflow comes from structure, not from constant mixing. So yes, oxygen gets consumed heavily. But instead of fighting that process blindly, the system is designed to handle it. Understanding oxygen dynamics in composting changes how you think about soil health too. When you add well-made compost to your beds, you're not just adding nutrients, you're adding organic matter that improves soil structure, helping roots access both air and water. Soil life thrives in environments where oxygen can move through pores, but moisture is still retained. Compost that went through intense microbial activity, even periods of low oxygen, can be incredibly stable and beneficial once finished. The key is that the composting process reached completion, not that it stayed perfectly airy every second of the way. Your nose and your eyes are better tools than any rulebook. Healthy compost smells earthy, like forest soil after rain. It's dark, crumbly, and no longer recognizable as kitchen scraps or leaves. Problem compost smells sour, putrid, or like sewage. It may look slimy or matted. That usually means prolonged anaerobic conditions without balance. If your pile smells bad, don't panic. Mix in dry browns, fluff it up, and let oxygen back in. Most compost problems are fixable within days. Compost doesn't just need oxygen. Composting is a living, breathing biological fire that can consume oxygen at astonishing rates. If you don't build your pile to handle that demand, things go sideways. But when you understand what's happening, you stop reacting with fear and start working with the process. You realize that oxygen levels rise and fall naturally, that microbial communities shift, that structure and balance matter more than rigid rules, and suddenly composting feels less like following instructions and more like partnering with nature. Here at Rootshaven Grounds, we're all about learning what's really happening beneath the surface so we can grow stronger plants, richer soil, and more resilient gardens. If this opened your eyes to a new side of composting, you're going to love what we explore next. Make sure you subscribe, share this with a fellow gardener who's battling a smelly pile, and keep growing with us.